Some houses are just buildings. Others are alive. They watch you, they whisper, and they don't like visitors. These aren't ghost stories or urban legends. These are real accounts from people who dared to stay in beach houses that should never have been rented. And once you enter, you may never leave the same. Story 1. I've never shared this story anywhere before, mostly because I've tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But after what happened last summer, I can't shake it, and I feel like someone should know. It started when my friends and I rented a beach house for a long weekend getaway. The place was beautiful, secluded, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, with a private stretch of sand no one else had access to. The kind of place you'd see in travel magazines, all airy windows, weathered wood, and the faint smell of salt in the air. The first night was uneventful. We were 5 in total. Me, my best friend Claire, her boyfriend Jake, and 2 other friends, Maddie and Ethan. After unpacking, we spent the evening drinking and laughing on the deck, the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs below. Everything felt perfect, almost too perfect. I first noticed it the morning after we arrived. I woke before everyone else, as I often do, and went for a walk along the shoreline. That's when I saw it, a single set of footprints in the sand, leading from the water to the base of the cliff where the house stood. Odd, I thought. No one else was awake yet, and there was no way anyone could have snuck in that early without us noticing. The footprints were small, definitely not an adult's. But I shook it off as a child playing on the beach earlier, or maybe my eyes were just playing tricks on me. By nightfall, the air in the house started to feel off. The wood creaked more than usual. The wind seemed to whisper through the corners of the rooms. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I couldn't ignore it. When we all gathered for dinner, I mentioned the footprints casually, trying not to seem paranoid. Jake laughed it off, saying, "Maybe it's the ghost of the beach. You know, haunting your fancy vacation." We all laughed, but I didn't feel reassured. That night, I woke up to the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was a branch brushing against the window, but the sound moved, closer, deliberate. My room was on the 2nd floor, facing the ocean, and there was nothing out there but sand and waves. Heart racing, I grabbed my phone and shone the flashlight toward the window. Nothing. I tried to calm myself and went back to bed, but then I saw it. From the corner of my eye, I caught a shadow flit across the room. Not a shadow of a person in the house, too sharp, too fast, but something standing in the doorway. I froze. There was no sound. My rational brain screamed that it was a trick of the light, maybe a tree outside or the moon casting its glow in a strange angle. But my gut told me otherwise. It was wrong. Morning didn't bring relief. I was jumpy, and even casual things felt unsettling, the way the blinds never seemed to stay in place, or the way the furniture sometimes looked slightly shifted when I walked past it. Maddie, who is normally the most skeptical, whispered to me that she had woken up in the middle of the night to find someone sitting at the end of her bed, just staring. She thought she had dreamt it, but I knew exactly how she felt. The 3rd night is when everything escalated. I was alone in the house for a few hours because the others went out to explore a nearby town. I decided to sit on the deck with a glass of wine, listening to the waves. That's when I saw movement from the corner of the property, near the cliff. A small figure, barely discernible in the dark, seemed to be watching. I froze. I thought it was a local, maybe someone walking along the beach, but the figure didn't move. It just stood, watching. My instincts screamed at me to go inside, but before I could move, the figure vanished. And then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not coherent, just a low whisper, almost like the wind carrying words, but it distinctly said my name. Michael. Michael. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, heart pounding, watching the shadows dance across the walls. By the time the others returned, I was exhausted, pale, and probably looked insane. I tried to explain, but they all brushed it off as me being jumpy, stressed from work, or too much wine. On our last day, we decided to pack up early and have one last walk on the beach. I was lagging behind, staring at the waves, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I saw something in the sand. A small, childlike drawing, something like a circle with lines radiating out, almost like a crude sun. But it was freshly drawn, and I hadn't seen it before. And then the footprints appeared again. They didn't lead to the water this time. They led straight to the cliffside, stopping at the base of the house. My stomach dropped. Someone had been here, near the house, the whole time. But there was no one around. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the house itself was holding its breath. We left that day without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in that house. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my phone to check the photos I'd taken during the trip. I froze at one of them, a picture of the deck at sunset. In the far corner, almost invisible, there was a figure. Small, dark, and standing perfectly still. Its face was indistinct, but the shape of its head. It was like a child, or something pretending to be one. Since then, I haven't returned to the beach, haven't gone back to that town, and I avoid the ocean when it's dark. I keep thinking about that house, and the way it seemed alive, like it was waiting. Watching. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear whispers in the wind. Not from the sea, but from the house itself, telling me to come back. I never will. Story 2. I've always been drawn to old houses, the kind that creak and groan like they have memories embedded in the walls. So when my friends found a beach house for rent on a quiet stretch of coast, I didn't hesitate. It was rustic, charming, and completely isolated. The kind of place where you could forget the world existed. From the moment we arrived, something felt off. The exterior was weather-beaten, shingles warped, paint peeling, but inside, the house had an odd charm. Sunlight poured through tall windows, and the smell of salt mixed with old wood was almost intoxicating. My friend Sam, who organized the trip, joked that the house looked like it had been untouched for decades. I thought it added character. On the first day, we explored every inch of the house. Living room, kitchen, the 3 bedrooms, even the attic. That's when I noticed it. A door at the end of the hallway, small, painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The door was locked and there was no key in sight. Probably a storage room, Sam said. Maybe it's locked because the floor's unsafe. I nodded, but my curiosity gnawed at me. Throughout the day, I found myself glancing at that door, wondering what was behind it. By nightfall, the house settled into its usual rhythm, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the wind rustling through broken shingles, but the locked door seemed to hum with some silent energy. That night, I woke around 2 a.m. for no reason, heart pounding, feeling a sudden urge to walk the hall. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon through the windows. That door at the end of the hallway caught my eye immediately. Something about it felt alive. My hand moved almost without thinking, and I tried the knob. Locked, of course, but then I heard it. A faint scratching from inside. I froze. It's probably just the wind, I whispered to myself. But the scratching turned into something more deliberate, like fingernails dragging along wood. I stumbled back into my room, heart racing, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning I told Sam about it, hoping to get a rational explanation. He laughed, but not the easy laugh of disbelief. There was a slight hesitation in his eyes I didn't like. Maybe it's mice or something, he said finally. But he didn't look convinced. We spent the next day at the beach trying to ignore the house. But the locked door remained in my mind. That evening, I was alone again while the others cooked dinner. I found myself creeping down the hallway, drawn toward it. Then I heard a whisper. Not my name this time, just a soft, wet breath of words that sounded like a plea. "Let me out." I froze, convinced my mind was unraveling. I slammed the door shut with my shoulder and ran back to the kitchen. My friends noticed my pale face but didn't press. Later, after everyone went to bed, I couldn't sleep. Something compelled me to grab a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. I returned to the hallway, heart hammering. The scratching and whispering started again the moment I knelt by the door. I worked on the lock for what felt like hours. Finally, with a sharp click, the door swung open. The room was wrong. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, and completely empty, except for the walls. They were covered in what looked like names, dozens and dozens of them carved into the wood. Not neatly, but scratched frantically in different sizes and depths. Some were faded, almost illegible. Others were fresh, still raw. At the very center, a single phrase stood out. "He is here. He watches. He waits." I stumbled back, nauseated. I wanted to leave, but something compelled me to look closer. Among the names, I saw one that made my blood run cold, my own. I bolted from the room and slammed the door shut, nearly collapsing in the hallway. I couldn't breathe. I didn't sleep that night, and when dawn came, I convinced myself it was a nightmare. Or maybe someone had played a sick prank. The next day, we planned to leave early. As we packed, I felt eyes on me, though no one was around. When I turned to look at the locked room, I noticed something new. A small handprint on the outside of the door, fresh, child-sized, and just above it, scratched lightly into the paint, were the words, "Come back." I froze, unable to scream. My friends were distracted, loading the car, oblivious. I couldn't convince myself they'd see it if I pointed it out. They wouldn't believe me. And in that moment, I realized the house wasn't just old, it wasn't just abandoned, it was alive. It had remembered us, and it wanted more. We left quickly, without saying a word. I never went back to the coast, never returned to that town, but even now, months later, I sometimes wake up to the sound of scratching at the walls, faint whispers that drift through my apartment like a tide. I've read about these beach houses before, the kind people rent in isolation, places that feel perfect until they aren't. Some say it's just old houses settling, old wood cracking. Some say it's folklore, stories to scare tourists, but I know better. That room is still out there, behind that locked door, waiting for someone else to find it, waiting for the next name to be carved into the walls. Sometimes I think I hear it calling me, even now. Story 3. I don't even know where to start with this one, because even writing it now, months later, makes my hands shake. It happened last summer, and it still haunts me. I'll try to keep it as close to the truth as I can, even though no one would believe me. I rented a small beach house with my boyfriend, Alex. The place was advertised as secluded and peaceful, perfect for a quiet getaway. The photos looked inviting. A small 2-story cottage, whitewashed walls, a deck overlooking the sand. No one else had booked the house during our stay, which made it seem perfect, until we arrived. The neighborhood, if you could even call it that, was empty. No cars, no people, not even stray dogs. Just the faint sound of waves and the wind through the dunes. The house itself looked fine, but there was a strange stillness about it, almost like it had been waiting. The first night was uneventful. We made dinner, drank wine on the deck, and watched the sunset. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Almost too quiet. No seagulls, no children playing, no distant sounds of life. Just silence and the ocean. The second day, Alex went for a surf early in the morning, and I stayed behind to relax. That's when I noticed something strange. The sliding glass door to the deck, which I had locked the night before, was slightly ajar. I could have sworn I locked it. I closed it again, more firmly this time, and double-checked the deadbolt. Later, I went into the kitchen to make coffee, and I found something even stranger. The drawers were slightly open, and the utensils inside were neatly arranged, almost too neatly. I know that sounds trivial, but the house had been completely empty when we arrived. I hadn't touched the drawers, and Alex hadn't been back yet. By the evening, I told Alex about it, trying not to freak him out. He laughed it off. "Maybe the wind got in," he said. "Or you're just imagining things. The house is old. Things settle." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, I woke up to a noise. Not loud, just movement. Something pacing in the living room. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, listening. The sound stopped when I held my breath. Slowly, I got out of bed, tiptoed to the door, and peeked out. The living room was empty. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was probably the house settling again. But when I turned to go back to bed, I saw it. Footsteps, small, wet footprints leading from the sliding door to the sofa, and they were gone as soon as I blinked. I swear I didn't imagine it. The next day, we decided to take a long walk on the beach. It was low tide, and the sand stretched for miles. We didn't see anyone, not even other footprints. That's when I noticed something else. A message written in the sand, huge and sprawling, as if someone had dragged something across the beach to make it. It read, "Stay, don't leave." I froze. Alex laughed nervously, trying to make it seem like a joke. "Maybe the tide wrote it," he said. But it was too precise. And the tide hadn't reached that part of the beach yet. I didn't say anything else, but a chill ran down my spine. That night, the house felt different. The air was heavier, and the shadows in the corners seemed darker, almost moving on their own. I tried to sleep, but I kept hearing whispers. Not words, just faint murmurs. They sounded like someone was talking right behind me, but whenever I turned around, no one was there. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a sound that made my blood run cold. A voice, clear and close, whispering my name. "Emily! Emily!" I screamed, and Alex woke up immediately. I tried to explain, but he brushed it off again, telling me I must have been dreaming, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. The final night was the worst. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone moving in the house. I grabbed a flashlight and walked carefully through the hallway. That's when I realized Alex's room was empty, his bed untouched. My heart sank. I ran to the deck and screamed his name, but the only answer was the crashing waves. And then I saw him, or something that looked like him, standing on the sand below, perfectly still, staring up at the house. His movements were jerky, unnatural, almost inhuman. Before I could react, the figure vanished. I ran to the sliding door, trying to get out, but it wouldn't budge. The lock had changed, somehow, like it had been fused shut. And then I noticed the footprints. Hundreds of them surrounding the house, leading nowhere and everywhere at the same time, appearing out of nowhere. I don't know how long I was trapped. Hours, maybe. Days felt like hours. When the morning came, the door finally opened. I ran to the edge of the dunes looking for Alex, but there was no one. No figure, no footprints, nothing. I left immediately. I didn't care about the rental deposit, the belongings I forgot, nothing. I haven't returned since, and I haven't spoken to Alex about it. When I called him later, he said he had slept through the entire night, woke up, and found the house empty, completely normal, as if nothing had happened. I keep thinking about that house, the way it felt alive, the way it watched, the whispers that called my name. Sometimes I dream of it at night, and I can hear footsteps pacing just beyond my bedroom door. I don't know what I experienced or if it was real. But I know one thing, that beach house was never empty. It's never empty, and I will never, ever go back. Story 4. I don't usually share this story, because most people would think I'm exaggerating, or worse, lying. But everything I'm about to say is true. I lived it, and the memory still makes my stomach turn. It started when my friends and I rented a beach house for a long weekend. The place was old but charming, perched on a cliff above a secluded cove. No one around for miles, which was perfect, until we arrived. The first night was ordinary. We unpacked, drank wine, and watched the waves from the deck. But when I went to bed, I noticed something strange. The house was silent, too silent. Not the comforting kind of quiet that comes with isolation, but the unnatural, tense kind that makes every creak and groan of wood seem amplified. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. A soft whisper coming from the living room. I froze under the covers, straining to hear. The whispering continued, faint, unintelligible, like someone speaking just beyond the edge of comprehension. I convinced myself it was the wind. Old houses make strange noises, I told myself. But the whispering didn't stop. It got closer, shifting, moving along the hallway outside my room. My heart pounded in my chest. I finally got up, shaking, and crept toward the door. The hallway was empty. Nothing moved. The whispering had stopped. I checked every room, the kitchen, the living room, the bedrooms. Nothing. I felt foolish, embarrassed, and scared all at once. When I returned to bed, the whispering began again, this time directly in my ear. "Get out!" I bolted upright. My friends were asleep, completely unaware. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me, heavy and suffocating. The next day I tried to push it out of my mind. We spent the day on the beach, walking along the shoreline, letting the sun wash away the tension. But the house lingered in my thoughts. Even in daylight, it felt wrong. That evening, we gathered on the deck to watch the sunset. I noticed the blinds in the living room move slightly, even though no one had touched them. Shadows stretched oddly across the walls, and I swear I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, something tall and thin, standing perfectly still in the living room. When I looked directly, nothing was there. I tried to ignore it, but that night the whispers returned, louder, clearer. My friends were asleep. I was alone in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, trembling. The whispering came from the corners, the walls, the floor, everywhere and nowhere at once. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, desperate. Something wanted me to leave. I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The following morning I woke early and went for a walk on the beach. That's when I noticed something etched into the sand, near the edge of the cliffs. Footprints. Not human footprints, at least not completely. They were too long, too narrow, like something standing on tiptoe, and they didn't follow a straight line. They looped, circled, and then disappeared, stopping abruptly near the base of the cliffs, directly under the house. I ran back and told my friends. They laughed, brushing it off as driftwood or strange tidal patterns. But I knew better. That house had eyes. That house watched. That night, the whispers escalated. They didn't just come from the walls anymore. They came from inside the rooms, from beneath the floorboards, from the ceiling above. The words finally became clear, fragmented, like a broken record. Don't sleep. Don't trust. Leave. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, every small movement set my nerves on edge. I kept seeing shadows in the corners, glimpses of something standing behind the doors, waiting. Around 3 a.m., I heard a door creak open, slowly, deliberately. I froze. The kitchen door on the opposite side of the living room opened by itself. Then, something moved inside. Not walking, but sliding, gliding across the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone and shone the flashlight toward the kitchen. Nothing. I called out for my friends, but my voice sounded small, swallowed by the house. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean closer, almost alive, as if observing me, testing me. I backed into the hallway, the flashlight shaking in my hand. And then I saw it. A dark figure, taller than a man, hunched and faceless, standing at the end of the hall, completely still. I screamed. My friends woke, lights flicked on, and the figure vanished. No trace, no footprints, no sound, nothing but the residual chill in the air and the feeling that it had never been there. We packed and left first thing in the morning. I didn't look back, and neither did my friends. But the whispers never left me. Even now, months later, when the wind blows through the cracks of my apartment, I swear I can hear them, faint and pleading, "Come back, stay, don't leave. I'll never return to that beach. I'll never go near isolated houses again, and if I ever hear whispers coming from the walls of a home, I will leave immediately. Because I know now, some places remember you, some places wait, and some places never let you go." Story 5. I've tried to forget about this story. I really have. But every time I close my eyes at night, I see that house. I hear the waves crashing, the floorboards creaking, and the faint, urgent whispers that seem to follow me everywhere. I never told anyone, mostly because I didn't want them thinking I was crazy, but now, looking back, I realize that the truth is worse than anything anyone could imagine. It started when my friends and I decided to rent a beach house for a long weekend. We were 4 of us, me, my girlfriend Claire, my friend Josh, and his girlfriend Lila. We found it online, a secluded house perched on a cliff overlooking a private stretch of sand far from the nearest town. The photos made it look idyllic. Whitewashed wood, tall windows, a wraparound deck, the kind of place you'd expect to find in a travel magazine. When we arrived, the first thing I noticed was how silent the surrounding area was. No cars, no people, not even gulls calling to each other, just the wind, the sand, and the waves. The house itself looked old but charming, with the kind of weathered wood that smelled faintly of salt and age. I thought it was perfect. I was wrong. The first night was normal. We unpacked, had some drinks, and watched the sunset from the deck. But as darkness fell, the house seemed to take on a life of its own. I noticed small things immediately. The floorboards creaking in patterns that didn't match our movements, shadows stretching at odd angles, and an inexplicable chill in the corners of rooms. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself that old houses made noises and shadows looked strange in moonlight. But when I went to bed, I realized that something else was at work. Around 1 a.m., I woke to a faint scratching sound coming from the hallway outside my room. At first, I thought it was Josh or Claire moving around, but the sound didn't match footsteps. It was lighter, almost deliberate, like someone or something was dragging their nails along the wall. I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was a tree branch scraping against the siding, I told myself. But then I heard it, whispering. Quiet, urgent, unintelligible at first, but then clearer. It sounded like someone calling my name. "David, David." I froze, heart racing. The voice wasn't Josh, wasn't Claire, it wasn't human. I slipped out of bed and peered down the hallway. The hallway was empty, but I could feel something there, watching. My skin crawled, and I retreated into my room, locking the door and pulling the covers over my head. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I tried to laugh it off with the others, but something had changed. The house didn't feel inviting anymore. It felt alive. The air seemed heavier, the shadows darker. Claire noticed it too. She said the hallway felt wrong, like it was stretching or bending in ways it shouldn't. Josh joked about it being old house paranoia, but even he looked uneasy. That afternoon, we explored the beach. It was low tide, and the sand stretched for miles. We found no one, not even footprints, until I noticed something carved into a rock near the cliffs. A symbol, circular and jagged, almost like a sun with broken rays. It was freshly etched. The other three didn't see it at first, and when I pointed it out, Josh laughed nervously and said it must have been natural erosion. But I knew better. That night, the house made its presence undeniable. I woke again around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of whispering. It was all around me now, inside the walls, beneath the floorboards, from the corners of rooms. The words were fragmented, but one phrase repeated over and over. You shouldn't be here. Leave. I wasn't going to leave. I couldn't, not yet, but I was terrified. I walked through the hallway trying to identify the source. That's when I saw it, a shadow, darker than the darkness around it, standing at the far end of the corridor. It didn't move like a human. It glided. Its shape was vaguely humanoid, but distorted, elongated. I froze, and it vanished. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. By the next morning, I realized something else. Items in the house were moving, not dramatically, but enough to notice. A chair slightly shifted from where it had been, a book lying open on the floor that we hadn't touched. Even the blinds seemed to flutter as if an invisible hand had brushed them. The tension in the group escalated. Lila refused to stay in her room at night and slept in the living room. Claire and I took turns staying awake, watching the shadows. Josh, stubborn as always, insisted it was our imagination, but even he stopped sleeping well. The real terror began on the third night. I woke to find the living room door ajar, even though I remembered closing it before bed. I grabbed my phone for light and slowly approached. The whispering was louder now, almost deafening, echoing from every corner. And that's when I saw them. Dozens of footprints surrounding the living room, small, childlike, but perfectly formed, as if someone had walked there recently. There was no one in the house. Panic set in. I ran from the room, screaming for the others. They came out, flashlights in hand, but when we returned, the footprints were gone. The living room was as if nothing had happened. But the whispering continued, now forming words that chilled us to the bone. You brought them here. Now they're ours. We had no idea what they meant. By the fourth night, we were on edge. None of us slept. The house seemed to anticipate our every movement. Every door creaked before we touched it. Every shadow shifted just out of sight. I noticed the walls, small scratches, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. Some scratches were recent, others older, faded into the paint. And in the corner of the hallway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A small, dark figure crouched in the shadows, watching me. It moved only when I looked away. The final night was unbearable. Around midnight, the whispering escalated into distinct voices. Not just calling our names, but mocking us, pleading, crying. Some sounded like children, others like old men. The sound came from everywhere. The walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. And then the doors started opening on their own. One by one they swung wide, revealing empty rooms, but I could feel eyes watching from inside. I tried to gather the others, but it was too late. Shadows detached themselves from the corners, coalescing into shapes. Figures, pale and faceless, appeared in the hallways. They didn't move like humans. They glided, circling us, whispering in voices that no human should ever hear. I ran to the deck, thinking I could escape to the beach, but the sliding door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself was holding us in. Claire screamed as a figure passed through her, its presence cold and suffocating. Josh tried to grab one, but his hands went through it like smoke. Lila collapsed, clutching her head, screaming that she could hear hundreds of whispers inside her own skull. I knew then. The house was alive, It wasn't just haunted. It was a predator. It fed on fear, on attention, on presence, and it had claimed us the moment we arrived. I don't know how I survived. At some point, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, and the figures vanished. The whispering stopped. The house was silent. Claire, Josh, and Lila were gone when I woke fully. I was alone. I ran, barefoot, across the sand, never looking back. I called the police, but they found nothing. The house was abandoned, empty, just as it had appeared online. No signs of struggle, no signs of my friends, no footprints leading to or from the house. Just me. I've tried to move on, but the memories linger. I see shadows at the edge of my vision. I hear whispers on quiet nights. Sometimes in my dreams I'm back there, watching the deck, the house looming above me, waiting for me to return. I know I can never go back. I know that if I do, the house will take me completely, just as it took my friends. And I know that it's still there, perched on its cliff, empty to the world, but never empty. Waiting, watching. And sometimes, when the wind carries the sound of waves to my apartment, I swear I hear the whisper again. Come back. We're waiting. I will never go back. If you enjoyed these stories and want to uncover more real-life horror that lurks just beyond the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Who knows what you might encounter the next time you dare to explore the unknown. And don't forget, if you've ever experienced something strange in a beach house or anywhere that felt alive, share your story in the comments below. Your experience could be the next chilling tale we feature.